Rock and roll, daddy. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thanks for joining us. Greatest Wrestling Promos. This one is all my fault. It is one of my favorites from Mr. Bob Backlund in 1994. It is ridiculous. It is off the hook. It's off the wall. It's off the chain. Under the table. Under the weather. Under the radar. Thanks for joining. Double M, Michael Mercy, Rack Time, Rob, Steve, and you crazy cats. We hope you enjoy your promo. Let's do the thing.
Put that cigarette out.
What? Oh, sorry.
I was looking at myself.
Sorry. No. Mr. Bob Backlund does not win the World Wrestling Federation title during this promo. He has been the champion, as he'll tell you, since 1978. So all of this title tracker stuff that's going on with Roman Reigns, they're giving you all the different dates, and Roman is catching up to Hogan, and all of it's for nothing. The longest reigning champion is Bob Backlund. I'm pretty sure he beat Bruno's. If you go from when he won it, 78 to 94, well, that's got to beat Bruno's combined reigns.
15 years. And that really negates Hogan's run as well for the 4 years, does it not?
He never lost it. Sculling through in the towel. He was railroaded.
Well, we're not going to throw in a towel on this episode and bringing you some great commentary.
So before we roll this promo, Bob, what was your thoughts on the comeback of Bob to the WWF, the former champion coming in and saying that he's going to, golly, by gosh, try to give it another go?
Well, you know something, Daddy? There's Bob Shaman running rampant in Hollywood. They got us as sponges. They got us as builders. They got a furniture store appropriating my culture. They even had a movie, What About Bob? It was played by a guy named Bill. But that's not fair. I'm tired of Hollywood Bob washing my people. So what Mr. Bob Backlund did was, now he came back in, I think sometime in 92, and it was crazy then how, like, being gone for 8 years was an eternity, where now people return from 20 years ago all the time. But he had a very, almost, I guess, intentional not fitting in. He's not colored. Put that cigarette out. Very, very non-cartoony, very straightforward. I'm still howdy-doody type of wrestling type of guy. And when he snapped in 94, let me see, 1994, I would have been just turning 35.
Against Brett.
Yes, against Brett.
Which should have been the ultimate, and it was the ultimate technical match. Like, Brett was, a great good guy, and Bob was the ultimate good guy, and the match would start with a handshake, and you would think, regardless of who won, it would end with a handshake. And it did, among other things.
Wow. This was crazy, too, because really at the same time, the cage match at SummerSlam in 94 with Owen Hart and Brett was kind of in between. I could have sworn, did Brett wrestle Bob twice, and it was the second one where Bob turned on him, or just the once? It's been a minute. But
no, it was the first. I think it was the first time. He was on Superstars.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the build to this was crazy because Bob Backlund looked and sounded and talked like no one else on the TV program. He was putting Bret Hart, by the way, put over this chicken wing submission as the deadliest thing you could ever be in. It's the jaws of life, and you're not getting out. And Bob Backlund had this story. It wasn't often they mentioned the past back then. If it, guys would tag team when they were hated enemies the year before at this stage of the game. It wasn't often they mentioned anything in the past. They didn't shy. They played old footage. Arnold Skolin, like you said, thrown in the towel. And Bob Backlund would put one of the writers from WWF Magazine in the chicken wing.
Oh, killed him.
What's that?
Killed him. That was like Nikita sickling David Crockett levels of uncomfortableness.
Yeah.
Like, is this guy trained to take this?
He took that chicken wing home with him on that one.
Oh, man.
But they had him taking out your Doinks and Lex Luger, too, which was still a huge deal.
Oh, yeah.
And a handful of other good guys, too. So he was on a rampage, and it was pretty much, it seemed like a foregone conclusion. Okay, he fights Brett at Survivor Series. Brett puts this down. This is kind of silly. I think a lot of us still thought Owen might take it from him or whatever. And the victory the victory to me was a pleasant surprise, because I was a Bob Backlund. Now I'm a teenager, so I like the bad guys. And I thought he was just so much fun. to be sports education versus sports entertainment. I thought that was so clever and so much fun. And you put the Mister, and he was just because I did find the product cartoony, and he was yelling at the product, and he kind of spoke for us in a weird way. And there's also the bombacity that he said Bret Hart represents the new generation, and they're like 6 or 7 years apart in age. That was also hilarious.
And Bret had been there since '86, I believe.
It was really preposterous.
Just basically a few years after Bob left. But I guess that would be new generation.
Yeah, no, totally. But even then, I mean, like I said, they didn't mention the past much. So when Bret Hart was that top champion, they didn't mention the Hart Foundation with the Anvil that much. They kind of alluded to it when Anvil came back, but they kind of just tried to make he's only been around for 3 years as a singles guy the whole time. It was kind of silly. But the surprise of Bob Backlund winning, and he convinced me, even as a 14-year-old who now knows everything's a work and blah, 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 he convinced me he's out of his mind. Just like we watched Roddy Piper a few weeks back, who convinced us successfully he's out of his mind. Bob Backlund, in this maybe a minute, convinces me he's out of his mind. And he has the championship, which is double reason to panic because this madman has the championship. How are we getting it back now? That's how I feel as a fan. And it's funny, and that's why I love this.
So, Rob, this is 2 years and a bit after Ric Flair took the belt. So as out of the blue and unnatural as that was, who is this bad guy coming in and taking the belt? Bob Backlund coming in. He had
blast from the past, huh?
He had a very, very long reign, 5-year reign back in the 70s, early 80s. He was who came in after Bruno Sammartino. I'm sure you've heard from Iron Mike the name Bruno Sammartino. It was the mythic, legendary wrestler who just had a stranglehold on the belt for a decade across 2 different reigns. Like a decade. Who's champion for a decade? But that was Bruno. And then this guy just came in, the All-American boy. Some people, and someday we'll cover some Harley Race promos calling him Howdy Doody. The Vince McMahon Sr. wanted a smiling, happy-go-lucky All-American boy as his champion. And kind of like what Cena was a few years ago, the crowd was not buying it, but the promoter said, I don't care. That's who I want representing the company. He was incredibly reliable. He was clean. You know, everyone said the guy, he barely drank. He'd have a beer every once in a while with the boys. He never did drugs, never missed a show. He took everything very, very seriously. And despite, I think one of the things about Bob Backlund, why he isn't remembered in the upper echelon of wrestling legends is he played his character too well. The smiling, happy-go-lucky Bob Backlund, people think that was really him. I read his book. It's amazing. Any wrestling fan out there who is even just mildly interested in Bob, even if you're not interested in Bob, do yourself a favor and read his book. The guy is incredible, super inspirational, incredible work ethic, will to win, will to survive, really tough upbringing. You would not think that the smiling, happy-go-lucky All-American boy from Princeton, Minnesota. Princeton sounds like it's a nice little town. The guy had a really rough upbringing. Some gang stuff was involved too, some deaths of people close to him. And I recently saw on a Facebook group someone talking hypothetically in their primes, who would win in a shoot, Brock Lesnar or Bob Backlund? I think anyone who immediately goes, well, obviously Brock, hasn't thought about that long enough, because Bob might not win, but he's going to definitely make Brock Lesnar crippled. If Brock wins that fight, he's crippled. There's no way he's walking away not crippled. Bob Backlund's strength, I would say, is on par with Brock, if not more. I've seen him one arm pick up so many guys. Hulk Hogan in the short arm scissor lift. Just completely insane. So I would think his strength is comparable. So just filling in Rob or any other wrestling fan who's not very familiar with Bob Backlund, his strength, despite what he looks like, is comparable to Brock Lesnar. He didn't have the build to reflect it, but his strength was like scrawny guy ripping a phone book. It doesn't make any sense, but he's got the tendon strength. So on top of the strength, his conditioning was superhuman. Like it was Superman conditioning. He did the Harvard step test for an hour every day as part of his training, 400 ab wheel crunches. The guy was superhuman. So if there was an actual shoot, he would take everything that Brock or anyone like that would throw at him. He would absorb it, take it. Take a look at some of his semi-shoot fights in Japan. And then when the other guy is tired and exhausted, then Brock would or Bob would run circles around whoever's beating up on him. But Rob, just to give you an idea of what's going on here, he's basically Steve Rogers, to put it in comic language. Yeah. He's from a bygone era. The world has moved on without him, and he tried to do the old shtick, smiling. This dude would shake hands with the referee and with his opponents before the match. He's just such a good dude, and it just didn't work after a while. And he had a match with Bret Hart. He lost, and he snapped. And he slapped Bret, and he lost it. So this promo right here is the pinnacle of him losing it. Hope you enjoy it. And before we start rolling it, Steve, just some quick thoughts on the return of Mr. Backlund to the WWF.
Well, we're officially into one of my blind spots in wrestling.
Okay.
You know, Backlund is not someone that I was even aware of as a kid. And then
they never mentioned him in Crockett.
I don't know that he ever showed up that I remember ever to be mentioned. You know what I mean? So
okay, because I think he was down there before they put the belt on him.
And see, that was way before my time, though. Like
okay.
you think about when he was the champion in '78. Is that what you said? You know,
yeah.
I'm born in '77.
That's right. So it'd be before that. Yeah.
You know, so in '94, I was a junior in high school, going into my senior Survivor Series. I would have been my senior year, and just wasn't watching wrestling really. wasn't paying a lot of attention to it. I'd kind of peripherally check it out, you know. But I had a job, I had friends, I had stuff. So wrestling wasn't as much on my radar. And when I did see Bob Backlund, I'm like, who even is this guy? Like, what's his deal? You know? So it's not until later on in life that I really appreciated, like, the stuff that you say, the behind the scenes stuff, his physical, you know, in shapeness, his clean living, all of the things that make him that good, you know, clean cut American hero are the things I appreciate about him. But as far as being able to, you know, pinpoint something, I don't know that I never saw this match. I know what happened, you know, but I never saw it. And I just remember him kind of coming out in the bow tie and carrying a rule book or something, you know, yeah, or a clipboard or something later on, a couple of years later. But that was my Bob Backlund experience.
Yeah, he turned into comic relief after this, but this. So I hadn't been watching wrestling when he lost the belt, but not too long after that, I learned about his history, and it bugged me the way the reign ended, you know. And they had to get the belt on Hogan, so they had him sneak attacked by the dastardly Iron Sheik, rest in peace. He made Bob humble, and he took the belt off of Bob, and it just kind of sucked how Bob. They had plans for him to turn heel, but basically to do this exact thing, but in '83, to go after Hogan and get his belt back that he never lost. Because he didn't lose it. His manager threw in the towel. Bob couldn't defend himself. He was locked in the camel clutch, and the manager threw the towel in, forfeiting the belt. So Bob never quit. He's got a point there. He never got beat for the belt. But that was always like the thing that was just left lingering, and Bob refused to turn heel because he had a young girl in school. He didn't want her tormented. You know, your dad is such a jerk. And he turned down the money, which is so rare in wrestling. And I always admired him for that. And then when his daughter had grown up and was out of school and it didn't matter, then he went back and had some fun. Luckily, the opportunity was still there. They tried the old gimmick. It didn't work. So they called an audible. And the guy who everyone thought had no personality and no charisma, I think he just killed it. This is one of his best promos of his career.
Out of the park.
And here we go. Bob Backlund feels like God.
I am standing with Bob Backlund. He did exactly what he said he was going to do. Agree or disagree with his tactics. He is now two-time WWF champion.
First of all, young man, it's Mr. Bob Backlund. And you're incorrect. I've been the champion since 1978. I never lost the championship. Tonight, I just regained the belt. And I beat the man that represents your society. I beat him so I could save you. I'm gonna scrutinize you to the fullest. pasteurize you, homogenize you, and synchronize you back into morality. You understand, ladies and gentlemen, it's sports education. I'm your champion, and I'll take on anybody at all, ladies and gentlemen, in your generation, because I'm fighting for something that's more important than anything in this world. Has put morality back into your lives, and now your children have somebody that they can emulate after and try to catch up to. Because I feel like God!
Oh, man.
Can I double up just for a second? Can I just pat myself on the back? Okay, can I Barry Horowitz this one? I'm so happy. I got to relive this almost 30 years later with anybody. That's one of my favorite things in wrestling of all time, and nobody half remembers it. Like it's a period we don't talk about ever. So
I love it, man.
What a roller coaster that was.
I love it. So one of the things I noticed repeatedly is the voice cracking. I totally get that. I used to do voice acting student films around in my area, and sometimes the lines call for the big bombastic thing, and I would think to myself, well, I can do that. I remember listening to Ric Flair and Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan booming. I can do that. And that's what would happen in my voice. Like, you cannot just jump into it and do it. It's like Jim Morrison, right? You can't just do that. You have to train your voice for a long time to be able to do that. If you just try to jump into it, that's what happens. You get that.
But it was perfect for him.
But it suits him perfectly. It just makes him seem more nuts.
He needs to seem unhinged. And if he doesn't convince you he's unhinged, I don't know what to tell you.
And it's such a shame that the plan was for him to hold it for a while, and they called an audible again, and they took it off him a couple nights later.
Yeah,
put it on Diesel. He beat him in 8 seconds. It sucked. Bob talks about it in his book. It sucked that they did that. I thought with the build, it made more sense the way the belt was stolen from him back in the day, for him to have it for a while and then drop it to Brett back.
I understand if they didn't want Bob. It's so weird for me to call anyone else Bob. If they didn't want him to have it into WrestleMania, I kind of get that. But so then I guess your Rumble is your obvious one.
Yeah.
Okay, and also remember, Diesel had only been a babyface for 3 days.
That's right.
And he didn't even really turn babyface. He just chased Shawn Michaels out of the building. So it was kind of like, is he? He was like, and then kind of that weird. He's in the turning process, and then he just beats. And that wasn't even the main event that night at the last match. Not that really matters.
That's right.
But yeah, so that was a whole weird thing. Like, because if you would watch the pay-per-view, and this is the Thanksgiving Eve era of Survivor Series, that happened on a Wednesday. I think it was that Friday or maybe even that Saturday, Madison Square Garden. There you go. That was the end of that. So, and they told us really quick. So I remember all excited on WWF Superstars or Challenge or maybe Primetime, whatever it was, to be like, oh, cool. We're going to talk about how Bob Backlund is the new champion. That was great. And then they go, Diesel's the champion. I go, where was I? Did we all watch the same show? This is madness.
In the old days, they at least gave Stasiak had a few days, I think. Superstar had 9 months. Transitional champion, Superstar Billy Graham, man of the hour, man with the power. Like he had such a good run that it almost looked like maybe he should keep it. Like he's really off to the races here.
A lot of people felt that way. I think
and to lose it in MSG too. Oh man. Well, it's almost like Vince was like, you know what? We didn't take it off you legitimately last time. You're going to get pinned in MSG in 8 seconds. And finally, we'll lay that to rest.
And when you said Bob Backlund became a comedy character after this, he pretty much in essence became a comedy character during or after this promo.
Yeah,
because we didn't
pasteurize, homogenize, scrutinize.
Right. Once he did, I feel like God, and he's a complete madman. he's a madman. Then he loses in 8 seconds. So now he's no longer a threat. So now he's just a crazy guy running around, and for periodically for the next few years and whatever. So yeah, it was like this crazy crowning moment. I think there was money in the chase to at the very least have Diesel beat him at the Rumble. In my opinion, we couldn't have a few months of just the craziness.
Yeah.
And then Diesel's the one who saves the new generation. He's going to save us fans from the craziness.
Yeah.
And then if they want to do Diesel and Shawn still, which would probably make the most sense, at the Mania, blah, 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 blah. The rest is all history. But yeah, what a weird moment in time. It never gets talked about. It's a period of the wrestling that a lot of people stopped watching, of course. And it's a 3-day title run, so no one really talks about it. This is one of those in-between pay-per-view promos that I always love. I always suggest these. People don't really talk about them. They're not in the ring. They're not this big spectacle. They just kind of happen. Because I always love to pick those when we do these, and this is one of them. Who remembers this exactly? But I always do, because I just thought it struck me. It was good to see a fellow Bob have his moment, even if it was brief.
Well, here's the thing. Like he, the whole phrase "riding the edge of a lightning bolt," that kind of thing. He's riding. He's tilting back and forth between sinister and crazy. There are moments where he's looking at the screen and looking right down the barrel of the camera, and he's got those piercing blue eyes. He's scary.
Yeah.
Like
he had the Stone Cold Killer blue eyes before Stone Cold Steve Austin did.
And I was about to say, I think if you do this promo 2 years later, I think if you have this gimmick 2 years later, because he's only 45 here, in the type of shape that he's in, I think if you do something like this, even 2 years later with, Stone Cold kind of in play and these different people in play, I think you've got a story that's got some more legs to it, especially with the whole pushing the morality and I'm the sports education, all that stuff that he says. And I think that if he can put a little bit more of an edge on the crazy, I think you've got a real scary champion that you want to see Stone Cold come out and talk smack to. You want to see, as we're moving into the Attitude Era kind of stuff. Right. I think that there was something really special here, that it was just a little bit out of time, just in the wrong time to be as effective. But I also think if he only had it for 3 days and turns around and drops it to Diesel, I think what you've got the Vince McMahon scared to let things kind of play out.
Yeah.
And you don't want to say Vince is scared of anything, but Vince, when he sees a big man, that has a personality, he's going to jump on that guy as quick as possible instead of letting something like this breathe. But this could have been something really special. Because I love this promo. I think, he ends on the crazy side, but he could also do another promo 2 weeks later and end on the more sinister side, start crazy and end sinister. And it's like, you don't know what you're going to get. The fact that he could snap at any moment in the ring. I think that's a great gimmick for someone like him, who had the history that he had. It really is a cool thing that's unfortunate they didn't let play out.
Give credit to Petting Zoo too, I call that, because he was always so over the. He was a New York radio guy that Vince liked. Long story short, he was always so over the top cartoony, and he would always kind of wink at the camera so many times. He'd be very obnoxious. You always wanted to punch him. But on this one, he just he said what he said up top. He played it serious because it was the champion and not the first match guy, thankfully. And either he decided or someone told him play it straight. And he said he posed a serious generic question, whatever it was, to Bob Backlund. I don't remember. How do you feel? Whatever it was. And he just kind of kept a solemn face. Like he didn't oversell it, but Petting Zoo acted just a little bit uneasy. Like he was uncomfortable, and I hope this ends soon.
Not comfortable enough for a man wearing a cowboy hat.
He looked ridiculous because this was, I think it was San Antonio. Am I wrong?
Right, they were all doing the Western gimmick.
So
yeah.
Just real quick, I know, before we wrap everything up, just so I can make sure I've got my history straight before we flip it over to the outsider to see what he thought. So Backlund lost the belt to Iron Sheik. He was in the camel clutch, and his manager threw in the towel. Is that what happened?
Yeah.
and that paved the way. So really,
and Backlund was like injured. Sheik had these Persian clubs
had the
that he
clubs,
used to
yeah,
do it.
yep.
No one could do it. No one
Right.
could do it. But Backlund could do it because he was just so insanely strong, and he couldn't do
Right.
it as well as Sheik because he didn't train.
Right.
But the fact that he could do it as well as he could when guys much bigger than him, Ultimate Warrior, when he was a bodybuilder, actually tried to do it. They brought in bodybuilders, and one of them happened to be Jim Hellwig, and he couldn't do it. Like the bodybuilders could not do it because it's not just strength, it's technique,
Right.
and Bob had that. So he was injured because Sheik hit him with one of the clubs.
Right.
But even that angle was just a complete cluster muck because he was supposed to be injured by the club, but Sheik wasn't doing it. So Bob's like trying to pull the club on himself. Like, hey, I'm supposed to be injured by the clubs, and Sheik's just not doing it. Right. So it looked horrible. Bob's like rolling on the ground, grabbing the club, trying to injure himself with it. Like, come on, work with me here. This is why I lose the belt, because I go into the match with a
Can I
bad
ask you
neck.
a question, Michael? When was the last, if at all, when was the last time you watched that Iron Sheik Bob Backlund match? Where Sheik?
A couple years ago.
I'm going to recommend you never watch it again. I watched it like a month ago because I got time.
It's not good.
Oof, it's brutal.
Blassie is screaming at Sheik to stomp the neck, and he won't. Just again, like something was really weird. Like Sheik wasn't doing what you would think the injury angle would be, and then in the actual match, Blassie is screaming at him, "Get the neck!" You can hear it clear as day. Get the neck, and Sheik won't do it.
It's like, you know how all AEW fans think all old wrestling is 10-minute arm bars? This match was a 10-minute arm bar.
Yeah.
I think they just watched this one match and go, that's what you guys did.
So really, Sheik was the transitional champion because how long did Sheik have it before Hogan comes in?
Maybe, or
a couple weeks. Yeah, just under a month, I think. But here's the thing, Bob, there were a couple of ideas on who Bob would lose the belt to. And Bob, not the kind of, I mean, he got the belt because he was a yes, sir type of guy. Like he would follow orders because Vince Sr. didn't want to deal with difficult to work with guys. And Bruno had amassed enough clout and popularity that he could call his shots, right? He was putting butts in seats. But Bob, near the end, it wasn't like he was refusing to drop the belt, but he was just requesting, can I please lose it to a legitimate athlete? So I think
different times.
Who were the options? Was it Stud, Valentine? I forget who the options were at the time.
Well,
Morocco, maybe.
Sheik was a legit athlete.
That's why Sheik was picked, because he was an actual legitimate Olympian, and Backlund was like, it's believable that I could lose to him.
Right.
So that's why he was picked.
But now it also really plays into the coming of Hogan.
That too. It was a perfect exit for Bob and entrance for Hogan.
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't have been the same if Hogan beat Valentine for his first world title.
I don't even think Bob was there for all of 84. So January 84, Hulk beats Sheik. December 83, Bob loses to Sheik. So Sheik loses to Hogan in January. I don't think it was more than the middle of the year where Bob was gone.
Yeah, I've seen some of those matches where he stuck around, and it was sad to see how he fell down the card, and because he refused to do this at the time, to turn heel and go crazy, dye his hair black was, I think, the plan as well. But they just stuck him in mid-card matches, and the fans were like, "Oh, yay! It's the former champion," and it felt like, just go, because they're not giving you the ovation, it's the legend. It didn't seem like he was all that welcome, so might as well just go and try some other things.
Well, I'll ask you this. How sad would it have been? I'll just pick a random match. The 88 WrestleMania 4 Invitational 20-man Battle Royal. How sad would it have been to see Bob Backlund in that for a minute and a half?
Yep.
And maybe Butch Reed tosses him or somebody. I don't know who's in it. Like, it would have been sad. We wouldn't have wanted to see that in 87.
It's kind of like Pedro Morales, the way he just hung around after his world title reign, and he ended up in tag teams with, was it Tony Gurria and Robert Goulet?
Yes, Tony Gurria and Robert Goulet.
Old Robert Goulet, the wrestler Robert Goulet.
Steve Allen. Brian Adams, the singer, not the wrestler, and Sting, the singer, not the wrestler as well.
Were the Goulet brothers ever World Tag Team Champions?
The Goulet brothers.
One of the
Renee and
Goulet
Robert.
brothers ended up teaming with that pirate guy in 94.
Wait, were they plastic brothers or real brothers? I would have loved to see
Robert
the
Goulet.
Goulet. I would have loved to see the Goulets versus the Grahams. Not a legitimate brother among them. But you know what? What could have been, what might have been, but at the same time, we're lucky we got what we got. It's incredible that they put the belt on this guy for a day, considering the run he had. And, you know, some people seem to think it was complete hell the time he had the belt. I would have loved to have seen that reign. And I enjoy a lot of Bob Backlund title defenses on YouTube and on the network. But there's a lot of people who say he lost money and he was killing the business and stuff like that. So yeah, maybe Vince, once he did it, he hit the panic button. He had a flashback to when Bob was the champion, and now that he actually did it, he hit the panic button. Like, oh, we gotta,
a lot more to lose.
Yeah, exactly.
Vince he bought the company from his dad in 82. Am I right?
83.
Well, either way,
82.
December 83 is when Bob loses it.
Okay, he would have bought. I think he bought it the same year that Bob lost it, so earlier 83. But Rob, what do you think of Mr. Bob Backlund?
I'm glad you filled me in on the backstory of how this guy was basically just kind of perceived as the Captain Wonderbread, the All-American,
Captain America,
dull as dry toast. Yeah, kind of. Always, upright,
and that's what he was told to do. Like in Bob's defense, because I'm a huge Bob Backlund fan. That's what he was told to do, and he did it.
Yeah, and then to take this and flip it, not completely over to where he's just like bitter at the system that spurned him and he wants to burn it all down, but just as where it's like, I've always been right, and it's the world that's decayed around me. I'm still big. It's the pictures that got small, kind of. I am going to lead you to. They really could have played this out until you get that big moment where he's just confronted with his own hypocrisy, and it smacks him in the face about the whole thing.
Do you think a full circle? We could have went full circle where he regains his mind and becomes the hero again.
Either that or he just completely shatters.
I never thought about that before. Like I always just figured, well, he went nuts and he stayed nuts, but that would have been an incredible full circle journey for him.
It's like he's still playing that same character, but it's just like that Dutch angle tilt where something's off.
Yeah,
and it just becomes increasingly more obvious. Something's what's off as it goes on.
I mean, this promo looks like it's out of Batman 66. He's like a Batman villain.
Yeah, and when they put the villains on screen, they always turn the camera at the Dutch angle, so something's not quite right here. And that's basically what they're doing. And it's again, it sounds like it's a shame that he held onto that belt for a day
or a couple days. I forget what it was.
What a great couple of days. I chose that because I know what a big Bob Backlund fan you are too. And I'm a huge mid-90s Bob Backlund fan. Oh, good old Bob Hansen. He's dead. The moment where, later he had that unfortunate, not so hot match with Brett at Mania 11 in the middle of April of 95. They do that. They make a comedy where Bob Backlund's in his own hold and he yells, "I see the light." And he has and he decides he's going to run for president of the United States. Not kidding. We're not kidding at all, Rob. I did not make that up. That's where they went with this. But that Brett putting him in his own hold, maybe not then, but maybe a year after or whatever, might have been a fun way of having Bob have that full circle moment where he comes full circle and realizes how far he's gone. Being stuck in his own hold would be the best way to do that. But instead of seeing the light in that manner, he saw the light and decided he wanted to become the president of the United States of America.
Yeah.
I just looked it up.
An election year that year?
No, that's what made it even more preposterous.
Oh.
It's probably better that it wasn't an election year. I mean, these were also less political times back in the U.S.
Yeah.
It was just funny. Like we didn't care. Like president, who cares? Like, it was wrestling.
Yeah. In those days, it would have been treated as a joke it was intended to be, as
and it
opposed
was
to
treated exactly, and it was treated
Yeah.
that way. Yeah.
I just looked it up. 3 days. Bob Backlund was champion 3 days, but that's awesome. It's enough for me. I got Bob's original title belt from picked it up from Fandu Belts over there with the blue strap. I've also got the violet purple strap to switch it out when I get bored of it. So I got Bob's old belt. It's also the Superstar belt, but I just love that this Winged Eagle belt is also the Bob Backlund belt as well. Even though he only had it 3 days, when I look at it, I think of Brett and Macho and that Hogan guy, but also Bob Backlund as well. He got his mitts on this for a couple of days, so it's better than nothing.
Indeed, I'm glad he did.
All right, that's Bob Backlund, Feeling Like God, and thanks for picking that one. That was a great one. I don't know how many more Bob Backlund promos are going to be on here.
Challenge extended, Bob Hansen. Challenge extended.
Okay.
I think one day we might have to look at the one where he's crying when the belt got smashed, the old belt, which I just mentioned.
It's very good. Yeah.
Yeah, the Bruno belt, basically. When that one gets smashed, they replace it with the big green belt, but he's crying and going, "Why?" And we actually see some shades of Mr. Bob Backlund in that promo where he's crying and screaming and just completely he's lost and cracked. Maybe that one didn't have the effect on fans. I think that was intended. I think a lot of people looked at that and thought, what a wimp.
Yeah, I don't think he actually came out looking good in that one. It's there's a couple of Hogan ones too. One of them was when his belt gets cracked in '89, oddly enough.
Right.
And when he first gets cheated with the referee had the surgery from the multi-million-dollar man. I don't want to start but there are two moments where Hogan looks like a real crybaby, but he was so over he got away with it. But maybe I don't know. Maybe in the future, maybe I'll pick a Hogan one at some point, just because I think we kind of have to at some point. But maybe we don't.
Yeah, I've got a few Hogan ones in mind for down the road.
The backstroke and all that. With Bob Backlund, it's just a shame that his real world toughness didn't really translate into the wrestling world. I mean, Rob, just from looking at this guy, do you think that he could take most guys in a real fight?
Just from his size, yeah.
You think?
Just looking at him, it's like there's something about him, and I mean, we're seeing a more edgy, dangerous version of this picture here. Looks like he looks kind of like your crew cut neighbor, next door.
Well, this is actually, and a lot of people.
But he's the crew cut neighbor who spent 30 years in the Marines or something.
Right. A lot of people might not realize this, especially newer fans. But this is one of the realest guys who will eat your lunch, or at the time would eat your lunch, no problems at all. Legitimate. Was he All-American, I think, in amateur wrestling, but just real tough. The reason they put the belt on him is back in the day, like Ric Flair, you needed, and Harley Race especially, you needed someone that could handle themselves in case someone tried to pull something. Yeah. So sometimes the guy would be like, you know what, I'm going to pin this guy and take the belt. And what are you going to do when you do that in front of 10,000 fans? Say, hey, it doesn't count, boo-hoo. No, like if a guy wanted to, they say in wrestling, shoot and just go into business for themselves, then you're out of luck. Well, you couldn't do that with Bob Backlund. He would tie you into a pretzel, Stu Hart style. He'd make you smell your own butt. He was a very scary individual, despite the smiles and there's some shoot interviews out there where there's a guy named Stan the Lariat Hansen, big, tough, Uncle Stan, tough, ornery, chew, tobacco, chomping Texan, just your stereotypical tough Texan who'd chew you up and spit you out. This guy was bad. He broke Bruno Sammartino's neck by accident, but he still had enough force that he slammed him on his head and broke his neck. And they asked him one time, do you think you could take Bob Backlund in a shoot? Do you think you could get him in like a shoot hold? And Stan went, if he let me. That is a tough man who has no problem admitting this man could ruin me.
Yeah.
And I think Harley Race is legendary. Like whenever people talk about the toughest wrestlers that ever lived, it's Haku and Harley Race.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Harley Race one time when he was asked about Bob Backlund, Harley was like, obviously he had a cigarette, and Harley went, "That is a tough man. You don't want to mess with him." So, coming from Harley, who looks, sounds, everything about Harley screams tough. And for Harley to say, "I don't want to mess with him," it doesn't come through in the look, maybe in the promo, but just from what I've heard from other wrestlers, every one of them said, yeah, you don't want this guy in your life. You don't want to cross him. He is scary tough.
Well, you trusted him, and he did it. But that's the thing; he wasn't a bully, so he was really the perfect guy to be champion because no one can take anything on him, and you can. But he's reliable. Yeah, and the fans liked him just good enough.
And before we sign off here, I just want to share that Ric Flair story where they did a title for title. It was Bob versus Rick, WWF versus NWA title. I think it was down in Atlanta, maybe 83, 82, 83, something like that. And Bob calls up Vince Sr. and he says, "Something's off here, boss. Something's off. They're up to something." And so they were arguing about what's the finish going to be. And Bob just felt like they're going to try to pull something, boss. They're going to try to steal the belt from me. Well, luckily he was Bob Backlund, and his opponent was Ric Flair, who was a pretty good amateur wrestler himself. But the two, if Flair were to try something, he would be walking funny for the rest of his life. And so I think it's in Bob's book, or it might have been in a Ric Flair podcast, but Rick, went up to Bob in the locker room because Bob was on guard. He's like, "I know something is up here." And what Rick said to him before the match was, "Bob, just don't hurt me out there." And that's it. It's like, I'm going to be, I'm going to go into the fetal position and just let's get through this. And please don't hurt me. I am not going to try to shoot on you. I'm not going to try to steal the belt and unify the belt. Please don't hurt me. Because Ric Flair knew, like, this man will ruin me. He will kill me. So, and from, there's no video of it, but all accounts of the match say it was horrible because they weren't working. Like, Bob was on guard. He was careful. He didn't want to be in a sharpshooter where the bell would get rung or anything like that. So you just ended up with like
and Flair was worried about Bob thinking something was going on.
Killing him.
He didn't want to try anything.
Yeah. He was worried about being murdered legally in a ring. So
but now
it's just stop and go the whole time.
This was in 82.
The unification match?
When that happened, yeah.
Okay.
And it was down in Atlanta. And I'm reading up on it real quick, but I'm just looking at the timeline because Flair had not gone through Starrcade yet. The first Starrcade hadn't happened yet. But Flair also would do business with people. Flair, and that would kind of get played up real big when he would face Harley at Starrcade for the title because Race was offered money to just leave and not show. Really? at Starrcade, but Race kept the date, even though he was losing the belt to Flair.
Right.
And that always impressed Flair. And so I think if you had to worry about anything, you had to worry about the promoters, but I don't think Flair would have fearful of Backlund or not. I don't think he would have tried to take liberties to mess something up. I think, as long, because I can't imagine Flair not enjoying working with Bob Backlund. Shape as Backlund is in, and knowing how Flair loved to go, hour-long matches and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it might have just been, if anything was actually happening, it might have just been some of the boys trying to stir up some trouble, or maybe it was the promoter floating an idea, and Flair was like, "Not with me. You put the belt on Harley, and maybe Harley can do something, get Briscoe back up here, but not me."
They
stirred up.
Would it still have been in 82 the WWF?
No.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think so.
because they were still a part of the NWA at this point.
Oh, they hadn't separated yet.
No, not until 83 it says that they separate.
Okay. What were you going to say, Rob?
There's kind of an old story that Eric Dickerson, the running back, tells, but running into Lawrence Taylor from the Giants, generally regarded as the greatest defensive player ever. And they ran a play. Dickerson takes the ball, gets absolutely destroyed by Lawrence Taylor,
who's a pretty good wrestler, by the way. Lawrence Taylor.
Yeah,
he beat Bam Bam Bigelow.
Yep. That's right.
We might be able to find an LT promo, actually.
Yeah. Staggers back, to the sideline, and the Rams coach goes, "All right, we'll run that play again." Well, actually, as Taylor throws him down, he stands over and says, "Don't you ever try that nonsense," used a different word, but around me again. And staggers back to the sideline. Coach says, "Run the same play again." And Eric Dickerson just said, "Coach, that man out there told me not to do that anymore."
I could see Bob pulling that. Okay, Bob, I'm going to get you in a double butterfly suplex. No, you're not.
Don't you ever try that nonsense with me.
No, you're not.
Go back to Vince. Why didn't you do what I told you? That man out there told me not to.
The boss told me not to.
Eric Dickerson at that point going, "Yeah, that guy out there is saying, no."
Yeah, the boss told me not to. All right, that's Bob's I Feel Like God promo. It's excellent. And Steve, why don't you take us out?
I want to thank everyone for joining us every week at 6:05 here on the Greatest Wrestling Promos Ever. Thanks to Michael Mercy, of course. He's the godfather of it all. The 80s Toy Museum. Check him out over on his other YouTube channel. Rack Time
You didn't mention the big one, Armchair Directors.
I'm sorry, Armchair Directors.
I don't think you even know about that one. That one's been going on for over a decade.
Rack Time Rob, tell us what you got going on.
All right. Well, we've got Tuesdays at 9:05, the What's on Your Mind live stream, where we talk all things about G.I. Joe with my brother Mike and our good friend Mark the Honcho Weber, and of various guest hosts and etc. as our fourth regular host, Joe Colton, recovers from maternity.
Bob Hansen, the man with the plan. What's going on with you in San Diego?
Total mental insanity. Right. Hey, San Diego, Lego My San Diego, Claremont Mesa Boulevard, Mic Drop Comedy Club, April 11th, Thursday. Get your tickets. Go to my Instagram at Bob Hansen Jokes. Get the tickets from the link tree in the bio, blah, blah, blah. Stand-up comedy. We're headlining the whole thing. It's going to be bananas. We're going to say stuff, do things, say stuff related to the things we're doing, do stuff in correlation with the things that we're saying. Any way you slice it, cross your I's and dot your T's. I know what I said, if you know what I mean. And I think that you don't. We're going to rock and roll that it.
And I feel like Bob.
Of course, I'm Steve Glosson. Check out geekoutpodcast.com or Geek Out Loud, wherever you find podcasts. And until next time, hey,
bye.
Bring it.
We need to sign off. There's so many. We're Roddy Piper, and you're not.
Yeah.